Jabari Adebayo stood at the entrance of his restaurant, Taste of Heritage, watching with hawkish eyes as servers moved between tables. At 45, he had built his establishment from nothing into one of the most prestigious dining venues in the city. His 6'4" frame and broad shoulders commanded respect, and his tailored suit spoke of his success. But despite his achievements, Jabari carried himself with an edge of hostility that kept people at a distance. Table 7 needs cleaning. Now, he barked at a passing server who scrambled to comply. Jabari's reputation for excellence was matched only by his reputation for poor manners and a quick temper. He didn't care what others thought of him, all that mattered was that his restaurant maintained its impeccable standard. The evening was busy, as always. Jabari had decided to dine in his own establishment, sitting at his reserved corner table where he could observe everything. The meal before him was a masterpiece of his head chef's creation, tender oxtail stew with a side of jollof rice and fried plantains. He ate methodically, occasionally making notes about the flavor profile and presentation. It was during this inspection that she walked in. Makena Okafor moved hesitantly through the door, her slender frame almost swallowed by the flowing white dress she wore. At 28, she possessed a delicate beauty that turned heads, though she seemed unaware of the attention. Her dark skin contrasted elegantly with her outfit, and she carried herself with a quiet dignity despite her obvious nervousness. The maitre d' approached her with a tablet. "Do you have a reservation, ma'am?" "Yes," she replied softly. "Okafor, table for one." Jabari watched as she was guided to a table not far from his own. There was something about her that caught his attention, perhaps the careful way she moved, or the slight tremble in her hands as she accepted the menu. Weakness irritated him, yet he couldn't look away. Makena ordered a simple meal, then sat gazing around the restaurant with appreciative eyes. When her food arrived, she closed her eyes briefly before taking the first bite, as if savoring a precious moment. Jabari continued his meal, occasionally glancing in her direction. The restaurant was his domain, and he surveyed it like a king. When he finished his main course, he gestured impatiently for dessert. It was when the server brought his coffee that disaster struck. Jabari had turned to speak to his manager when someone bumped his elbow, causing hot coffee to splash onto his expensive shirt. He reacted instinctively, grabbing the nearest napkin to dab at the spreading stain. It took him a moment to realize he had snatched the white fork from Makena's table, the one she had yet to use. Without thinking, he wiped his face with it, leaving brown coffee stains on the pristine white fabric. Makena looked up in shock. "Excuse me, that's my—" "I know what it is," Jabari cut her off sharply. "My restaurant, my property." The restaurant fell silent. Diners stared in uncomfortable disbelief. The server who had been attending Makena took a step back, familiar with Jabari's temper. "Sir, I don't think," the server began. "Did I ask what you think?" Jabari snapped, tossing the now-stained napkin onto Makena's table. "Get back to work." Makena's eyes widened, her breathing becoming shallow. She pushed her chair back, standing unsteadily. "That was extremely rude and unsanitary," she said, her voice barely audible. Jabari rose to his full height, towering over her. "If you don't like how I run my establishment, you're welcome to leave." Something flickered in Makena's eyes, hurt, perhaps, or disappointment. She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. Instead, her face drained of color, and she swayed on her feet. "Miss?" The server stepped forward in concern. "Are you all right?" Makena's knees buckled. She reached for the table to steady herself, but missed. As she collapsed, Jabari instinctively moved forward, catching her before she hit the floor. Her body felt frighteningly light in his strong arms, her skin clammy to the touch. "Call an ambulance," he ordered, his voice cutting through the shocked murmurs of the other diners. For the first time that evening, perhaps in years, Jabari felt something other than irritation or pride, he felt fear. As they waited for the ambulance, Jabari laid Makena carefully on a booth seat, rolling up his jacket to place under her head. Her breathing was shallow, her pulse rapid. The restaurant's first aid kit provided little help. This was clearly something serious. "What happened to her?" someone whispered. "She just fainted," another replied. But Jabari noticed something the others didn't, the collection of pill bottles that had fallen from Makena's purse. He picked one up, reading the label with growing concern. These were serious medications, the kind prescribed for life-threatening conditions. When the paramedics arrived, they worked quickly, attaching monitors and starting in 4. Jabari found himself answering their questions, though he knew nothing about the woman lying unconscious before him. "She's coming with us," a paramedic said. "Are you family?" Jabari hesitated, looking at Makena's still form. The restaurant was in chaos, his dinner ruined, his shirt stained. But for reasons he couldn't explain, he said, "No, but I'm coming with her." As the ambulance doors closed behind them, Jabari looked back at his restaurant, his pride and joy, his kingdom. For the first time in years, it seemed small and unimportant compared to the fragile life hanging in the balance beside him. The hospital's emergency department buzzed with the controlled chaos that characterizes all such places, nurses moving with purpose, doctors being paged, families waiting with worried expressions. Jabari sat uncomfortably on a plastic chair, his large frame making the furniture seem child-sized. His presence had raised eyebrows, the contrast between his expensive, coffee-stained suit and his gruff demeanor made him stand out. 3 hours had passed since they had brought Makena in. 3 hours of waiting, with only snippets of information from passing medical staff. He had called his restaurant manager, barking orders about closing procedures, but otherwise remained fixed in the waiting area. He wasn't entirely sure why he stayed. Perhaps it was guilt, or perhaps some deeper instinct he didn't care to examine. "Mr. Adebayo?" A doctor approached, clipboard in hand. She was a short woman with a direct gaze. "You came in with Ms. Okafor?" "Yes," Jabari answered, rising to his feet. "How is she?" The doctor gestured for him to follow her to a quieter corner. "Ms. Okafor is stable for now. She regained consciousness about an hour ago." She paused, studying Jabari's face. "Are you a relative?" "No. She collapsed in my restaurant." He didn't elaborate on the circumstances. "I see. Well, normally I wouldn't discuss a patient's condition with a non-relative, but Ms. Okafor has given permission for me to speak with you." The doctor's tone became more somber. "Mr. Adebayo, MS. Okafor is very ill. She has an advanced form of leukemia. She's been undergoing treatment for some time, but recently decided to discontinue it." Jabari frowned. "Discontinue? Why would she do that?" "That's a question best asked of her. But I can tell you that her prognosis is poor. Her collapse today was due to a combination of factors: anemia, low blood pressure, and the side effects of her previous treatments." The doctor sighed. "She's being moved to a room now. She asked if you would visit her." Jabari nodded, feeling a strange tightness in his chest. He followed a nurse through the labyrinthine corridors until they reached a private room where Makena lay connected to various machines. The white hospital gown made her seem even more fragile than the dress she had worn to his restaurant. When she saw him, she gave a small smile that contained no resentment, which somehow made Jabari feel worse. "You stayed," she said, her voice thin but steady. Jabari shifted his weight, unused to feeling awkward. "I wanted to make sure you were all right." "That's kind of you. The doctor told me about your condition." He couldn't bring himself to say the word cancer, as if naming it might somehow make it more real. Makena nodded. "I've been fighting it for 2 years. But sometimes you have to know when to stop fighting." "What do you mean?" She gestured weakly to the chair beside her bed. When he sat, she continued, "The treatments weren't working anymore. They were just making my last days miserable. I decided I'd rather have a few good days than many miserable ones. How few? Jabari asked, the question escaping before he could stop it. The doctors give me about 4 days, maybe a week. She said it with such calm acceptance that Jabari felt a surge of irrational anger. And you're just giving up? Just like that? Makena's eyes flashed with a sudden strength. I'm not giving up, Mr. Adebayo. I'm choosing how to live my remaining time. There's a difference. Jabari fell silent, chastened. He had built his life around fighting, against poverty, against doubters, against competitors. The idea of accepting defeat, even in the face of overwhelming odds, was foreign to him. I owe you an apology, he said abruptly. For my behavior at the restaurant. It was unacceptable. Makena studied him for a long moment. Yes, it was. But I accept your apology. Just like that? Life is too short to hold grudges, don't you think? There was no self-pity in her voice, only a gentle wisdom that made Jabari feel suddenly ashamed of the many grudges he himself harbored. What were you doing at my restaurant tonight? He asked, changing the subject. A look of wistfulness crossed Makena's face. I have a list. Things I want to do before, well, you know. Dining at your restaurant was one of them. I've heard so much about it. The food was excellent, by the way, for what little I managed to eat. Jabari found himself at a loss for words. His restaurant, which he had always viewed as the pinnacle of his achievements, had been reduced to an item on a dying woman's bucket list. What else is on your list? He asked quietly. Oh, various things. Watching the sunrise from the mountain overlook. Reading the ending of my favorite book one more time. Eating a perfect mango. Small pleasures, mostly. She smiled again, and this time Jabari noticed how it transformed her face, bringing light to her eyes despite the dark circles beneath them. And dining at my restaurant was among these small pleasures? Yes. Food has always been special to me. My grandmother was a cook. She used to say that a good meal is a form of love. Makena's eyes grew distant with memory. I wanted to experience your food because I heard it captures the essence of our heritage. In a way, it was like connecting with my grandmother again. Jabari felt something shift inside him. He had built his restaurant on technical excellence and innovation, seeking accolades and recognition. The idea that his food could represent love or connection had never occurred to him. Ms. Okafor. Makena, please. Makena, he corrected himself. I have a proposition for you. Dawn was breaking outside Makena's hospital window, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. She had slept fitfully, her body plagued by pain that the medications could only dull, not eliminate. When she opened her eyes, the last person she expected to see was Jabari Adebayo, sitting in the visitor's chair with a determined expression. You're here early, she observed, her voice raspy from sleep. Jabari stood, pouring a glass of water for her from the bedside pitcher. I never left. I had some calls to make. Makena accepted the water gratefully. She noticed that Jabari had changed clothes, his coffee-stained suit had been replaced with fresh attire, though he looked as if he hadn't slept. What calls? I'm having my team set up a dining experience for you here, in the hospital. Makena blinked in surprise. You don't need to do that. You said dining at my restaurant was on your list. You didn't get to finish your meal. Jabari's tone was matter-of-fact, as if arranging a gourmet dining experience in a hospital room was an everyday occurrence. It's very kind, but... It's not kindness, Jabari interrupted, a trace of his usual brusqueness returning. It's business. My reputation is at stake. No one leaves Taste of Heritage without a complete experience. Makena wasn't fooled by his gruff exterior, but she didn't challenge him. Instead, she asked, when? Today. This evening. Jabari checked his watch. My chef and a server will be here at 6. I've already cleared it with your doctors. They seem to think it might be beneficial. The unspoken words hung in the air, beneficial for someone with so little time left. Makena nodded slowly. Thank you. Jabari seemed uncomfortable with her gratitude. He stood abruptly. I need to go oversee the preparations. I'll return this evening. After he left, Makena's doctor came in for morning rounds. Your friend is quite the character, she remarked as she checked Makena's vitals. He's not my friend, Makena replied. At least, I don't think he is. We only met yesterday. The doctor raised an eyebrow. Well, friend or not, he spent all night making arrangements for this dinner. He even had a lawyer draw up special permissions to bring outside food into the hospital. Very persistent man. Makena smiled faintly. Yes, I imagine he is. Throughout the day, hospital staff came and went, many of them mentioning the unusual dinner being planned. A maintenance worker was sent to adjust the lighting in her room. The head nurse arranged for a privacy screen to be set up. Even the hospital administrator stopped by, clearly both impressed and somewhat bewildered by Jabari's influence. As evening approached, a nursing assistant helped Makena wash and change into a fresh hospital gown. We also have this, the assistant said, producing the white dress Makena had worn to the restaurant, now cleaned and pressed. Mr. Adebayo had it taken care of. Makena was touched by the gesture. Though she lacked the strength to wear the dress properly, the assistant helped drape it around her shoulders like a shawl. At precisely 6 o'clock, there was a knock at the door. Jabari entered, followed by a man in chef's whites and a woman in the server's uniform of Taste of Heritage. They wheeled in carts laden with covered dishes, linens, and a small vase containing a single, perfect rose. Ms. Okafor, Jabari said formally, allow me to present Chef Daniel and Amara, who will be serving us this evening. Makena noticed the us, but said nothing as the hospital room was transformed. A rolling table was covered with a crisp white tablecloth. Fine china replaced the hospital's plastic dishes. Battery-operated candles provided a warm glow that somehow made the medical equipment fade into the background. When all was ready, Jabari dismissed the chef and server with instructions to return in 2 hours. Then he took a seat across from Makena, unfolding a napkin with a precision that spoke of years of dining in fine establishments. The menu tonight is a journey through our shared heritage, he explained as he served her a small appetizer of spiced plantain fritters. Each dish represents a different region, a different tradition. Makena took a small bite, closing her eyes as the flavors bloomed on her tongue. It's wonderful, she said sincerely. As the meal progressed through soup, salad, and onto the main course, Jabari found himself talking more than he had in years. He told Makena about growing up in a small village, about his grandmother who had first taught him to cook, about his journey to America with nothing but ambition and a handful of family recipes. My grandmother used to say that food tells our stories, he admitted. I had forgotten that, somewhere along the way. Makena listened, offering her own memories in return, her childhood in a bustling city, her love of books, her dreams of becoming a writer before illness had intervened. I still write, she told him. Short pieces now. The medication makes it hard to focus for long periods. What do you write about? Life. Death. The space in between. She smiled wryly. Lately, more about death. Jabari frowned. You speak of it so casually. What choice do I have? It's coming whether I speak of it or not. They fell silent as Jabari served dessert, a delicate confection of honey and nuts that melted on the tongue. Makena managed only a few bites before setting down her spoon, her energy clearly waning. Thank you for this, she said softly. It was better than I imagined. Jabari studied her face, noting the gray undertone to her skin, the way her eyes seemed to have sunk deeper into their sockets even in the short time he had known her. Something fierce and protective rose within him. "Makena," he said, using her first name naturally now, "what if you didn't have to die?" She gave him a sad smile. "Everyone dies, Jabari." "Yes, but not now. Not yet." He leaned forward, his voice intense. "I've been researching your condition all day. There are experimental treatments." "Which I can't afford and probably wouldn't qualify for," she interrupted gently. "I have money. And connections." "Why would you do that for a stranger?" Jabari hesitated. It was a question he had asked himself repeatedly over the past 24 hours. "I don't know," he admitted finally. "But I know I can't just watch you die without trying to help." Makena reached across the table, her hand trembling slightly as she placed it over his much larger one. "That's very kind. But I've made my peace with this." "I haven't," Jabari said stubbornly. Their conversation was interrupted by the return of Chef Daniel and Amara, who efficiently cleared away the remains of the meal. As they worked, Jabari's phone rang. He excused himself to take the call in the hallway. When he returned, his expression was different, focused, determined. "That was my doctor," he said without preamble. "I'm a match." Makena looked confused. "A match for what?" "For you. A bone marrow donor." Dr. Wong's office was sterile and impersonal, with medical degrees framed on white walls and a desk meticulously organized. The oncologist had agreed to meet with them outside of regular hours, a concession to Jabari's persistence and, perhaps, to the unusual circumstances. "Let me be absolutely clear," Dr. Wong said, looking between Makena and Jabari. "What you're proposing is highly irregular and comes with significant risks." Jabari sat forward in his chair. "But it's possible." Dr. Wong sighed. "Theoretically, yes. The preliminary tests show that Mr. Adebayo is a compatible bone marrow donor for Ms. Okafor, which is remarkable given that you're not relatives. However." "Then we should proceed immediately," Jabari interrupted. "It's not that simple," the doctor continued patiently. "Ms. Okafor's condition is advanced. Her body is weak. The pre-transplant regimen alone could kill her at this stage." Makena had been silent throughout the exchange, her mind processing the extraordinary turn of events. Just 3 days ago, she had been preparing for death, making peace with her limited time. Now, a man who had been a stranger was offering her a chance at life. What exactly would be involved, she asked quietly. Dr. Wong turned to her with a more gentle expression. "Intensive chemotherapy to destroy your existing bone marrow, followed by the transplant of Mr. Adebayo's healthy marrow. Then, if successful, months of recovery with a severely compromised immune system. The success rate for someone in your condition is low." "Give us a number," Jabari demanded. 20%, at best." Jabari nodded as if this were acceptable odds. "And for me? What are the risks?" "The donation process is invasive but generally safe. You would be under anesthesia while we extract marrow from your hip bones. Recovery typically takes a week or 2, with some pain and fatigue." Makena looked at Jabari's resolute profile. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, the question that had been haunting her since his offer. "You don't know me." Jabari met her gaze, and for once, his expression was unguarded. "I've spent my life building a business, acquiring wealth, earning respect. But in all that time, I've never done anything that truly mattered. This matters." Dr. Wong cleared his throat. "I should give you two some privacy to discuss this. But remember, Ms. Okafor, this must be your decision, based on what you want, not what anyone else wants for you." After the doctor left, silence filled the room. Makena stared at her hands, thin and pale against the dark fabric of her hospital gown. "I had accepted dying," she said finally. "I was at peace with it. And now?" Jabari's voice was unusually gentle. "Now I don't know." She looked up at him. 20% is not good odds. Better than zero. The process will be painful. For both of us. Jabari shrugged his broad shoulders. Pain passes. Makena studied him, this man who had been so rude to her only days ago, now offering to undergo a painful procedure for her sake. People were mysteries, she thought, capable of both casual cruelty and extraordinary kindness. If I agree to this, she said slowly, I need you to promise me something. Anything. If it doesn't work, if I don't survive, I need you to promise you won't blame yourself. That you'll know you did something brave and kind, regardless of the outcome. Jabari was silent for a long moment. I promise, he said finally, the word sounding strange on his lips, as if he were unaccustomed to making promises. When Dr. Wong returned, Makena had made her decision. I want to try, she told him. The following days passed in a blur of medical procedures and paperwork. Jabari's influence expedited processes that normally took weeks. Specialists were consulted, additional tests performed, and a treatment plan developed. Throughout it all, Jabari remained at the hospital, conducting his business by phone and laptop from a makeshift office in a corner of Makena's room. His presence was constant, a steady anchor in the storm of medical interventions. He was there when she began the aggressive chemotherapy that left her violently ill, holding a basin for her and wiping her forehead with cool cloths. He was there when her hair began to fall out in clumps, methodically shaving his own head in solidarity when she finally asked a nurse to shave hers. You didn't have to do that, she told him, reaching out to touch his newly smooth scalp. I know, he replied simply. As the days passed, they talked, really talked, in a way Jabari had never experienced. In the quiet hours of the night, when the hospital corridors fell silent and it seemed they were the only two people awake in the world, they shared their stories, their fears, their regrets. Jabari told her about his failed marriage, about the son who barely spoke to him, about the loneliness that had hardened into a shell of rudeness and impatience. Makena spoke of her interrupted dreams, the novel she would never finish writing, the children she would never have, the places she would never see. Maybe you still will, Jabari would say whenever her hope faltered. 1 week before the scheduled transplant, Makena's condition deteriorated sharply. Her organs, weakened by disease and chemotherapy, began to fail. The medical team huddled in concerned conferences, adjusting medications and treatment protocols. We may need to postpone the transplant, Dr. Wong informed them gravely. She doesn't have time for a postponement, Jabari argued, the old fierceness returning to his voice. If we proceed now, the chances of success drop even further. What are the odds now? Makena asked from her bed, her voice barely audible. Dr. Wong hesitated. Perhaps 10%. And if we wait? If your condition stabilizes, we could get back to 20%. But there's no guarantee it will stabilize. Makena closed her eyes, gathering her strength. When she opened them, she looked directly at Jabari. I want to proceed as planned. Makena. It's my decision, she said firmly. And I've made it. That night, as Jabari dozed in the chair beside her bed, Makena watched him sleep. His face, relaxed in slumber, looked younger, the lines of stress and habitual anger smoothed away. In the short time she had known him, she had seen him transform from a bitter, isolated man into someone capable of profound compassion and self-sacrifice. Whatever happened next, she thought, that transformation was a kind of miracle in itself. The transplant day arrived with a golden dawn. Jabari stood by Makena's hospital window, his powerful frame silhouetted against the light. When he turned, he found her awake, her fragile body nearly lost in the white hospital bed. I'm afraid, she whispered, her dark fingers trembling in his large hand. Don't be, Jabari replied. You're the strongest person I've ever met. She smiled weakly. That's quite a statement from a man who intimidates servers for sport. I don't like that man much, he admitted. These days with you. I feel different. You're still you, Makena said. Just the version that was always there, underneath. The medical team arrived, separating them for their respective procedures. As they wheeled her away, she reached out one last time. Thank you. Whatever happens, thank you. The anesthesia took Jabari quickly. He dreamed of Makena healthy and vibrant, walking with him through his restaurant kitchen as he taught her his grandmother's recipes. He awoke to searing pain in his hip where they'd extracted the marrow. Makena, he immediately asked. The transplant was completed, the nurse said. She's in recovery. Despite doctors' objections, Jabari insisted on seeing her. They wheeled him to her isolation room where she lay unconscious, connected to numerous machines. Dr. Wong's expression was grave. The next 48 hours are critical. Jabari refused to leave. He had his own bed moved into her room and maintained a constant vigil, following strict infection protocols and speaking to her through the long nights about the future he imagined for them both. On the third day, alarms shrieked as Makena's blood pressure plummeted. After the crisis, Dr. Wong delivered the grim news: her body is rejecting the transplant. What does that mean? Jabari demanded. Prepare yourself, Mr. Adebayo. She may not have much time left. Jabari held her hand tighter. You can't give up. Not now. Whether from his words or her own determination, Makena stabilized. A week later, the first signs of engraftment appeared. 2 weeks after that, she opened her eyes. You're still here, she whispered. I promised I would be. Recovery was arduous: infections, rejection episodes, and pain that medications couldn't fully relieve. Through it all, Jabari remained her unwavering advocate, learning medical terminology and bringing in specialists when needed. 3 months later, Makena was strong enough to visit his restaurant after hours. It's different, she remarked. Warmer somehow. I've made changes, Jabari nodded. More than just decor. The staff were relaxed and genuinely happy, the old atmosphere of tension gone. I'm writing a book, Makena told him over dessert. About us. Us? Jabari raised an eyebrow. What is there to say about us? Makena took his hand. That sometimes people enter our lives unexpectedly. That sometimes the most unlikely person can change everything. 6 months post-transplant, Dr. Wong delivered the news they barely dared hope for: Makena was in remission. The cancer was gone. Their celebration was quiet. As Jabari took her to watch the sunrise from the mountain overlook, he suddenly collapsed beside her. The doctors later explained that the donation procedure had revealed a congenital heart condition, worsened by stress and overwork during her recovery. Why didn't you tell me you were sick? Makena demanded at his hospital bedside. You had enough to worry about, he replied weakly. The roles reversed: now Makena was the advocate, researching treatments and demanding second opinions. But Jabari's condition deteriorated rapidly. No transplant could save him. On their final night together, Jabari asked the hospital staff to recreate their special dinner. As they shared a last meal, he handed her an envelope. The restaurant is yours, he said. You understand what food really means. I can't accept. You already have my bone marrow, he smiled. What's a restaurant in comparison? In the morning, with Makena holding his hand, Jabari slipped away peacefully. She felt his absence like a physical pain, yet somehow his presence remained, in her blood, in her bones, in her very cells. A year later, Taste of Heritage was thriving under Makena's direction. The menu now told stories of connection and transformation. Her book about their journey became a bestseller. Each morning, she watched the sunrise and whispered, "Thank you." And sometimes, in the quiet moments between sleep and waking, she could almost hear him reply, "I promised I would always be here."